They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but when she told everyone I had an STD after I dumped her, then I exposed her plastic surgery secrets, I discovered it tastes even better when it's calculated, precise, and absolutely devastating. The first text came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. My phone buzzing against the nightstand like an angry wasp, pulling me from the kind of deep sleep that only comes after finally ending a toxic relationship. Sarah and I had been done for exactly 4 days. 4 days of blessed silence, 4 days of not walking on eggshells, 4 days of remembering what it felt like to breathe without someone monitoring every exhale. The message was from my coworker Jake. "Dude, what the hell? Sarah's telling everyone at Murphy's that you gave her chlamydia." My blood turned to ice water. The kind of cold that starts in your chest and spreads outward until your fingertips go numb. I sat up so fast the room spun, staring at those words until they burned into my retinas. Murphy's, the bar where half our social circle gathered every weekend. The place where reputations were built and destroyed over craft beer and whispered conversations. Another text, this one from my friend Marcus. "Bro, is it true about the STD thing? Sarah's been talking about it all night." Then another, and another. My phone became an instrument of torture. Each buzz another nail in the coffin of my reputation. By dawn, I had 17 messages, 3 missed calls, and the growing realization that Sarah had just executed the most vindictive character assassination I'd ever witnessed. I called my doctor's office the moment they opened, my hands shaking as I explained I needed to come in immediately for a full STD panel. The nurse's professional tone couldn't quite mask her judgment. Even she had heard the whispers somehow. This was exactly what Sarah wanted. The doubt, the shame, the assumption of guilt that would follow me regardless of the test results. Dr. Peterson, a gray-haired man who'd been my physician since college, looked genuinely confused when I explained the situation. He pulled up my recent test results on his computer, the same comprehensive panel I'd gotten just 6 weeks earlier as part of my routine physical. His voice was gentle but firm as he confirmed what I already knew. "Your results from last month were completely clear. No infections, no diseases, nothing. You're as healthy as they come." The relief should have been overwhelming, but instead I felt something darker settling in my chest. Sarah knew I was clean. She had to know. We'd been together for 8 months, and she'd never once expressed concern about STDs. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a moment of panic. This was premeditated destruction. I drove home in a daze, my mind replaying every moment of our breakup. It had been civil, or so I thought. I told her we weren't working out, that we wanted different things. She'd seemed upset but not devastated. She'd even said she understood, that maybe we were better as friends. What a performance that had been. The next few days passed in a blur of awkward conversations and careful explanations. Friends who'd known me for years suddenly looked at me differently. Some believed my denials immediately, others seemed less certain. The damage was spreading like ink in water, impossible to contain or clean up completely. I showed my test results to anyone who'd listen, but Sarah had been clever. She'd planted seeds of doubt in just the right way, with just enough fake concern and reluctant disclosure to make her story believable. She'd positioned herself as the victim who didn't want to make a big deal of it, who was only telling people because she was worried about their health. It was masterful, really. Diabolical, but masterful. By Friday, I found myself sitting in my car outside Murphy's, watching through the windows as Sarah held court at our usual table. She was animated, gesturing with her hands, playing the wounded ex-girlfriend to perfection. I could see the sympathetic nods, the shocked expressions, the way people leaned in to catch every detail of her fabricated trauma. That's when something inside me shifted. The hurt and confusion crystallized into something colder, sharper. Sarah wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail about me. I'd been the one person she'd trusted with all her secrets. Every insecurity, every procedure, every carefully constructed lie that held her image together. And I remembered them all. The planning phase began that weekend. I didn't rush into anything. This required precision. Sarah had taught me that much with her calculated attack on my reputation. If I was going to respond, it needed to be surgical, devastating, and absolutely impossible to trace back to me. I started with what I knew. Sarah's entire social media presence was built on being the naturally beautiful girl next door. Fresh-faced, authentic, real. She'd built a following of nearly 15,000 people on Instagram by positioning herself as someone who didn't need filters or procedures to look good. Her bio literally read natural beauty, natural life, natural everything. It was all a lie. I knew because I'd been there for the recovery periods. I'd held her hand during the consultations, brought her ice packs after the procedures, helped her maintain the fiction that she was just under the weather for days at a time. The nose job when we'd been dating for 2 months. She told everyone she had a deviated septum that needed correction for breathing issues. I'd watched her choose the shape she wanted from a catalog like she was picking out a new car. The lip fillers every 6 months disguised as really good lip liner technique in her tutorials. I'd driven her to the clinic, waited in the parking lot while she paid cash to avoid insurance records. The breast augmentation she'd gotten right before we started dating passed off as a late-blooming growth spurt at 24. I'd seen the surgical scars she covered with makeup, felt the unnatural firmness she blamed on good genetics and push-up bras. The regular Botox injections she called her really good skincare routine. The cheek fillers she attributed to face yoga. The professionally whitened teeth she claimed were natural. The hair extensions she swore were just good volume products. Layer by layer, I'd watched her construct an entirely artificial version of herself, then market that fiction to thousands of followers who believed they were seeing authenticity. But I needed more than just knowledge. I needed proof. That's where my background in digital marketing became useful. I'd spent 3 years learning how to research people online, how to find the digital breadcrumbs that everyone leaves behind. Social media posts, tag locations, financial records, professional licenses, everything left a trail if you knew where to look. I started with her social media history, scrolling back through years of posts with new eyes. There it was, if you knew what to look for. The subtle changes in her appearance over time, the strategic angles that hid healing, the unexplained absences that coincided with recovery periods. Screenshot, save, document. I built a timeline of her transformation, complete with dates and locations. Then I moved to public records. Plastic surgery clinics were businesses, and businesses left paper trails. Professional licenses, business registrations, location permits. It all existed somewhere in the digital maze of public information. Dr. Harrison's clinic where she'd gotten her nose job. Dr. Kim's office where she got her regular injectables. The surgical center where she'd had her breast augmentation under a different doctor's care to avoid having everything on one patient record. I found them all. The breakthrough came when I discovered that one of her clinics had been involved in a data breach 2 years earlier. Not patient records, those were protected, but employee information, scheduling software, even some billing metadata had been compromised and later leaked on various databases that collected such information. It took me 3 weeks of careful searching, but I found fragments. Appointment scheduling codes that matched the dates she'd claimed to be sick. Billing codes that corresponded to the procedures I knew she'd had done. Nothing that directly violated patient privacy, but enough breadcrumbs to confirm the timeline I'd already constructed. The smoking gun came from an unexpected source. Her own social media habits. Sarah was meticulous about documenting her life, posting constantly about her daily routine. But I noticed gaps, usually 3 to 5 days at a time, that coincided perfectly with recovery periods. She'd disappear from social media entirely, then return with carefully angled photos and claims about being disconnected for mental health. More damning were the location tags. Sarah was obsessive about checking in everywhere she went, but during procedure periods, her location services would suddenly show her in areas of the city where her clinics were located, always followed by several days of no location data at all. I spent hours mapping her digital footprint, creating a comprehensive picture of her deception. Every lie, every cover story, every carefully crafted piece of fiction that supported her natural beauty, brand. But the most damaging evidence came from her own mouth, recorded in a moment of vulnerability I'd completely forgotten about until now. 3 months into our relationship, Sarah had gotten drunk at her friend's birthday party. Really drunk. The kind of drunk where all your carefully constructed walls come tumbling down and the truth spills out like water from a broken dam. We'd been sitting in my car afterward, waiting for her sobriety to return, when she'd started crying about how fake she felt. How she'd spent so much money changing herself that she didn't even remember what she originally looked like. How terrified she was that people would find out and realize she wasn't the natural beauty she pretended to be. And I'd recorded it. Not intentionally. I'd been using a voice memo app to remind myself to pick up dry cleaning the next day, and I'd forgotten to stop the recording when she'd started talking. 23 minutes of Sarah, in her own words, detailing every procedure she'd had done, every lie she'd told, every aspect of her constructed identity. I'd discovered the recording weeks later and had meant to delete it, but never got around to it. It had been sitting in my phone's voice memo folder for 5 months, forgotten until now. Her voice slurred but unmistakably hers, admitting to everything. I spent $12,000 on my boobs, $8,000 on my nose, and I don't even know how much on all the injections. My lips aren't even real, Jake. Nothing about me is real. I'm so fake and I'm terrified everyone's going to find out and realize I'm just another plastic surgery girl pretending to be natural. 23 minutes of confessions, self-doubt, and detailed descriptions of procedures that directly contradicted everything she'd built her public image on. The perfect ammunition for someone who just had their reputation destroyed by lies. But I still wasn't ready to act. This required more than just evidence. It required strategy. Sarah had shown me how to destroy someone carefully, methodically, in a way that seemed organic and unstoppable. She'd taught me that the most effective character assassination looked like truth reluctantly revealed, not like an angry ex seeking revenge. I needed to study her methods. I started paying attention to how she'd spread the STD story. She hadn't just blurted it out randomly. She'd been strategic. She'd started with mutual friends who she knew would be sympathetic to her, people who already had minor issues with me, or reasons to believe I might be capable of such carelessness. She'd timed it perfectly, waiting until a busy weekend night when alcohol would lower people's inhibitions and make them more likely to share gossip. She'd chosen Murphy's, a place where information spread quickly through our entire social circle. Most importantly, she'd positioned herself as reluctant to share, as someone who was only speaking up out of concern for others' health. She'd made herself the responsible one, the victim who was courageously warning others despite her own embarrassment. It was a masterclass in reputation destruction, and I took notes. My plan began to crystallize. I wouldn't just dump Sarah's secrets online for everyone to see. That would look like revenge, and revenge is easy to dismiss. Instead, I'd let the truth reveal itself gradually, naturally, in a way that would make people feel like they discovered it themselves. The first step was establishing credibility. I needed to position myself as someone who was concerned about authenticity and honesty in social media, someone who just happened to notice inconsistencies in influencer content. I created an anonymous blog called Reality Check Reviews, focused on examining the authenticity claims of social media influencers. I spent 2 weeks building content around other influencers, always maintaining a tone of careful investigation rather than malicious attack. I wanted to establish a pattern of thoughtful, evidence-based analysis. The blog started gaining traction. People were hungry for someone to call out the obvious deceptions they saw online, but felt too polite to mention themselves. My posts about other influencers were shared widely, praised for their thorough research and fair presentation of evidence. I was building an audience that would be receptive to the truth about Sarah without ever mentioning her name. Meanwhile, I continued gathering evidence. I expanded my research beyond just Sarah's procedures, looking into her entire online presence. Her product endorsements where she claimed to only promote things she genuinely used, while I had receipts showing she'd returned most items immediately after the sponsored posts. Her candid photos that were actually the result of elaborate staging and professional lighting. Her spontaneous content that was clearly planned weeks in advance. Layer by layer, I documented a pattern of deception that went far beyond just hiding cosmetic procedures. Sarah had built her entire online presence on lies, and I was going to expose all of it. But the procedures remained the centerpiece. That's what would hit hardest because it struck at the core of her brand identity. Everything else was just additional context that would make the main revelation more damaging. 3 weeks after starting the blog, I was ready to publish the post that would destroy her carefully constructed world. I titled it The Natural Beauty Influencer Who Isn't, a case study in social media deception. Professional, analytical, devastating. I started with general observations about the rise of natural beauty, influencers, and the pressure they face to maintain authenticity while competing in an increasingly artificial landscape. I discussed the ethical implications of promoting natural beauty while secretly undergoing extensive cosmetic procedures. Then I introduced Sarah's case, referring to her only as Influencer S, to maintain the pretense of journalistic objectivity. I presented the evidence methodically. The timeline of her appearance changes, supported by carefully cropped screenshots that focused on the transformations rather than identifying features. The gaps in her social media presence that corresponded to recovery periods. The location data that placed her near cosmetic clinics during times she claimed to be focused on natural wellness. I included expert commentary from cosmetic surgeons who could identify the signs of various procedures in before and after photos. Professional opinions that confirmed what anyone with knowledge could see, that Influencer S had undergone extensive cosmetic work while claiming to be completely natural. The post was 15 pages long, thoroughly researched, and absolutely damning. But I saved the most devastating evidence for last. The audio recording. I didn't include the full 23 minutes. That would have been too obviously personal and vindictive. Instead, I extracted key segments where Sarah detailed specific procedures, edited them together with clear transitions to maintain context, and presented them as leaked audio of Influencer S discussing her cosmetic history. Her own voice, admitting to everything she'd built her career on denying. I posted it on a Friday night, the same day of the week Sarah had chosen to destroy my reputation. Poetic justice. The response was immediate and volcanic. Within hours, people had figured out that Influencer S was Sarah. The screenshots were too distinctive, the timeline too specific. Her followers began connecting the dots, comparing her old posts to my evidence, seeing the deception for themselves. The comments section exploded with betrayal and anger. People who had followed her for years, who had bought products based on her recommendations, who had felt bad about their own appearance compared to her natural beauty, realized they'd been lied to systematically. But the real damage came from the shares. My post was picked up by larger accounts focused on influencer culture, then by gossip blogs, then by mainstream media outlets discussing deception in social media marketing. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed over 100,000 times and shared across every platform where Sarah had a presence. Her Instagram comments became a battlefield. Followers demanding explanations, calling her a fraud, sharing their own evidence they'd noticed over the years. Her carefully curated image was crumbling in real time. She tried to respond, posting a lengthy statement about personal attacks and invasion of privacy. She claimed the audio was taken out of context, that she'd been going through a difficult time when it was recorded. She accused me by name of being a bitter ex seeking revenge, but it was too late. The evidence was too comprehensive, too well documented. Her own words were too clear and detailed to dismiss as contextless rambling. The timeline I'd constructed was too precise to explain away. More damaging were the secondary revelations that emerged once people started looking closely at her content. Other influencers came forward with stories about Sarah's deceptive practices. Brands began distancing themselves from her sponsored content. Her follower count started dropping rapidly as people realized the depth of her deception. The most satisfying moment came when Murphy's Bar posted on their social media about hosting a Truth and Consequences happy hour, clearly capitalizing on the drama that had started in their establishment weeks earlier. The same venue where Sarah had destroyed my reputation was now profiting from the destruction of hers. I watched it all unfold from behind my anonymous blog, feeling a satisfaction that was both sweet and hollow. Sarah's world was collapsing exactly as mine had, but with surgical precision rather than desperate flailing. Her lies were being exposed not through angry accusations, but through careful documentation and her own recorded admissions. The irony wasn't lost on me that her obsession with image and perception had provided the very weapons used to destroy her credibility. Every carefully staged photo, every strategic absence, every lie told to maintain her fictional identity had become evidence in the case against her authenticity. But the real victory came in the broader impact. Sarah's fall became a cautionary tale about the dangers of building a career on deception. My blog post was cited in articles about influencer accountability, used as an example in social media ethics discussions, referenced in academic papers about digital authenticity. She'd tried to destroy me with a lie about my health and character. I'd responded by exposing the lies that defined her entire public existence. The difference was that my counterattack was built on truth, documentation, and her own words. It couldn't be dismissed as bitter revenge because the evidence spoke for itself. She'd provided the ammunition for her own destruction through years of careful deception and one night of drunken honesty. 3 months later, Sarah had lost 2/3 of her followers, all of her major sponsorship deals, and her reputation as a natural beauty influencer. She'd retreated from social media almost entirely, posting occasional updates that were met with skepticism and mockery. My reputation, meanwhile, had been quietly rehabilitated. People who'd believed her STD story began to see it in a new light once they understood the depth of her willingness to deceive. The comprehensive nature of her lies about her appearance made it easier to believe she'd also lied about my health. I never officially connected myself to the blog post that destroyed her. Reality Check Reviews continued to publish analysis of other influencers, maintaining its reputation for thorough, evidence-based investigation. But occasionally, when someone mentioned Sarah's downfall in conversation, I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. She'd taught me that reputation destruction required patience, strategy, and perfect timing. She'd shown me how to position an attack as reluctant truth-telling rather than vindictive revenge. I'd simply applied her lessons more effectively than she had. The cold dish of revenge had been worth the wait, not because it felt good to watch her suffer, though I'd be lying if I said it didn't, but because justice had been served through truth rather than deception. She'd tried to destroy me with lies and been destroyed by her own lies in return. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's letting someone's own actions provide the consequences they deserve. In quiet moments, I sometimes wondered if I'd gone too far. Sarah's deception about cosmetic procedures, while ethically questionable, wasn't inherently harmful the way her lies about my health had been. She'd been selling a false image, but I'd exposed personal medical information and private insecurities. But then I remembered that night at Murphy's, watching her perform her victim act to our mutual friends. I remembered the texts flooding in at 2:47 a.m., the judgment in my doctor's office, the careful explanations I'd had to give to clear my name. She'd chosen to weaponize lies about my body and health to destroy my reputation. I'd responded by exposing the truth about her body and the lies she'd built her career on. The methods were different, but the principle was the same. Actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences arrive exactly when they're most devastating. She told everyone I had an STD after I dumped her, so I exposed her plastic surgery secrets. In the end, we both learned that the truth has a way of surfacing eventually, and that people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, especially when their entire house is made of carefully constructed, easily shattered lies.